Chapter 4. The Mediator. As Don Shula said, and I hope you like some of these quotes, but it says, you win with good people. Character is just as important as ability. Character is just as important as ability. So who are the mediators? Well, mediators come from all walks of life, from every profession and every business. As I mentioned in the introductory part of this program, is that to me personally, education level doesn't make or break a mediator. It's your experience with dealing with people. It's your interpersonal skills that you have, the way that you've dealt with people over your lifetime, all of the experiences that you've accumulated in how you handle different situations over your lifetime is what's going to make you a good mediator. With the interest of mediation in this country in recent years, many people have entered the field as either volunteer mediators in public disputes or as paid mediators in private practice. There's lots of opportunities for mediation out there, either through government areas or through the private sector, because every company, every entity that's out there, if they have employees or they provide a service, they're going to be in need of mediation at some point or time. It says, although that many people believe lawyers are preferred over mediators who are not lawyers, the fact remains that no single professional group has an inside track to success as a mediator. Over the past several years, this author has presided over the mediation training or orientation of over 2,000 people, and I think this is probably closer to maybe 4,000 people now. And it's come to the conclusion that counselors learn the process faster and initially better than other professionals, and here's why. Because there is a direct correlation between the communication and the listening skills that professional counselors have and what mediators have. Okay, there's counselors. It's just a natural outcropping of their profession to be a mediator. As a matter of fact, we trained a lot of counselors. We trained the American Association of Christian Counselors is one of the groups that we provide mediation training and services for. And now, one of the things that you would not want to do or be able to do is that if you've counseled some folks, then you can't then turn around and be the mediator in whatever their situation is. However, if you have an associate who's a counselor, that counselor could mediate your folks' problems and you could mediate their folks' problems. You know, it's like most of these insurance EAP programs where you're going to cure these people in 3 sessions. Okay, how many of these folks' problems are really cured in 3 one-hour sessions? Very few. Okay, so their primary problems still exist. And even though they can't afford more counseling, they probably can afford a mediation. Okay. Let's see. The technique, skills, and prohibitions of mediators are the same as those in which the client-centered counselors are trained and work every day. Very similar. Very similar. Although I would make a lousy counselor. I would make because I want to fix things too well, and besides that, I don't have the patience to be a counselor. I have the patience to be a mediator, to see you one time, deal with your issues in a 3 or 4 or 5 hour session, and then move on. Okay? But I know I'd be a lousy counselor. Like the mediator, the client-centered counselor does not make a decision for their client to abide by, but subtly encourages the person in counseling and through counseling to take ownership of and responsibility for an acceptable course of action and follow through with it. Lawyers, physicians, businessmen and businesswomen, engineers, and all others learn the techniques of mediation, but usually at a slightly slower pace than the counselors, simply because that's not their profession. Okay? Now, there is one group of folks that I have the opportunity to run into from time to time that I'm constantly amazed at how effectively they resolve conflict. And that would be at the airport. And I'm not talking about the people that are screening you. I still get a little bit upset with those folks myself. But as a matter of fact, just a few months ago, I had an opportunity to do a program for Dale Carnegie to review one of their programs for college credit. And a friend of another professor and I were flying from DFW to the airport in St. Louis, Missouri. Well, upon getting ready to fly back from that, it's one of those things where, you don't joke at airports ever. And he was wearing something that set off the alarm. And so they had this wand that they go and they check you with. And so he said, well, I don't want a guy checking me, I want a woman checking me. And the guy said, why? And he said, well, I just think that's a little gay. The guy said, okay, called security over, they took him in the back room and they strip searched him. Okay? You don't want to play by their rules? Okay, then they have a set of rules that you will play by. So, don't joke at the airport. It's just, but when you leave the screening area and you go and you see these ticket takers and the people that schedule you to get on the plane, and we were at an airport recently, and because of weather, first it was a weather thing, and then the flight was delayed about 3 hours, and then when we got on the plane was defective, and so it took another 2 hours to get another plane there. So we had a 2-hour trip that took almost 6 hours, and people were mad because they were missing connections, and people were upset, and they were standing up there and they were hollering and screaming at the people trying to reschedule them, and they were just standing up there just nicely, just smiling, said, we feel your pain, we understand. Yet they were taking all this, and I just sat back and just kind of was amazed. They didn't get defensive, they didn't take it personally. Now, they may have gone behind that screen and hollered, nailed, and punched the wall, but the way that they appeared to their customers was very calm and very, very empathetic, not sympathetic. Okay, and they did an outstanding job of handling that conflict, dealing with difficult people. I've had some retired airline pilots take this course, and they turned out to be very good mediators because they're very patient, they're very detail oriented. It goes on to say that the lawyer may not, however, have a clear grasp of the practical business aspect of the dispute. Well, I don't know that I would say that lawyers don't have a clear business grasp. You've got a lot of business people that don't have a clear business grasp of the situation, of business situations. What I think is, though, that a lawyer is going to tend to want to practice law, maybe unknowingly, maybe subconsciously, because that's their profession. And so you've got to fight through that, being an advocate, being in the adversarial role, and not be a lawyer when you're a mediator. A business person, on the other hand, usually will have a grasp of those issues, and if they are paramount issues in the dispute, will be able to help the parties move toward the resolution by helping the parties realize what their best interests are. Once again, we focus on the interest, and I think everybody would have that ability regardless of what their profession is. If you name any dispute, you will probably know someone knowledgeable enough of the technical details of such dispute that will, with appropriate mediation training and adequate process, could help the parties come to a satisfactory resolution. As it says earlier in this text, if you just give mediation a chance, odds are 90% of the time they're going to get resolved. Well, on the other hand, if you don't do anything, 50% of the time they resolve themselves anyway. 50% of the time they will resolve themselves anyway. So you obviously have a much better chance if you go through the mediation process, and just attempting the mediation process is going to increase the odds that you're going to be able to have a resolution or reach a settlement or solution to that issue. The mediator's role is that of a facilitator. Their role is to assist the participants in voluntarily reaching their own mutually accepted resolution of the issues in the dispute. The mediator will facilitate communication between the parties, helping them identify and explore attitudes and feelings that have kept them from reaching a resolution in the past. The mediator is going to be the keeper of the process and is going to control the process by these rules that we're going to cover here in this a little bit. The mediator will assist the parties to help them identify the problem, to summarize and restate, prioritize issues, to generate options, to evaluate those options. Now, the mediator is not going to evaluate those options, but what the mediator is going to do is to, by asking questions, help them think through what these options are. Okay? Sometimes we do that by something simply as brainstorming. Okay? And so we ask the parties to come up with ideas that they think might resolve this situation. okay? And then we talk about those. And typically someone will come up with some silly off-the-wall thing, and so you will ask, well, explain to us how that will work. Explain to us how that will resolve the situation. Well, it won't work, but I want it to happen. Okay, then let's don't talk about things that won't work. Let's talk about things that you think will work. Okay? And remember not to make fun of anybody's suggestion, even though you're probably rolling in the floor, rolling in the aisle, laughing inside. Yes, sir?
Do you ever use a whiteboard or a chalkboard or anything for?
All the time.
Okay. Easily destroyed record, but
easily destroyed record, right?
Visible
but,
to everybody.
If there's something I want both of the sides to see, and whatever I do is, well, first of all, in my office, I have a conference room where we do mediations in that I have a built-in whiteboard in the wall, and which I've used from time to time. I always have paper, and hopefully, if, you know, I make use of whatever my environment is. I don't go to any added expense I don't lug something like this around. I don't carry a computer with me. There's too many things can go wrong. If I have a computer, then that means I need to have a printer. If I have a printer, that means I got to carry paper. You know, that stuff gets heavy. So I use whatever is in my environment. And I'm not always doing mediations within my controlled environment. So, but typically I will use whatever I have. And if I want both sides to see what I'm doing, well, first of all, I'm going to make sure that I'm within vision of both of them at the same time anyway. And we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. But good question. Good question. Mediator techniques. The techniques that I have listed here will assist the mediator in remaining impartial and guide the parties towards their own mutually acceptable resolution. Each of these techniques should be utilized during each stage of the mediation process. Well, we talked about the stages of the mediation process, and don't get hung up on those stages. Those are just clearly defined stages that in a perfect world, for example, you have your introduction where you go over the rules, you have your ventilation stage, you have your generating option stage, you talk about your resolution stage, and then you come up with an agreement. Doesn't always work like that. They may be ventilating in their opening statement, and probably are. And by the time the other person gets ready to give their opening statement, he may not be giving an opening statement. His opening statement may be the resolution, the apology, or I didn't realize that's what happened. Let's see what we can do to resolve this. Okay? So don't get hung up in these form-fit stages. Okay? At any time in the process, you can restate or summarize the positions in a neutral or judgmental terms. Especially if you think that you're at an impasse, restate some of the things that you've already agreed upon. Restate some of the things that you think as the mediator are the key items of dispute at this point. Make certain that everyone understands what the others are saying. That's a primary reason for restating or mirroring or clarifying the statement. Not for your own benefit, but for the benefit of the parties so that they have heard and understood what's being said. You listen attentively. You describe, you don't evaluate. By not evaluating, never start a sentence off by saying, I think that, or you should. Okay? Those are statements that are putting your attitude, your views, your position into these statements. Okay? Now you could start off a statement by saying, well, how would it be if you did this? Okay? And I rarely even use that because what I'm probably doing is stating the obvious, and many times the obvious is what they've already tried and started and done. Be non-judgmental. Be outwardly non-judgmental. You know, people are going to say the silliest things, but you know, it may not be silly to them, and it's certainly, you don't know these people, and there may be something that's very valid about what it is they're talking about what it is, the point that they're trying to get across. Reaffirm the participant's power to change a seemingly hopeless situation. You know, if they say, well, this isn't going to work, then automatically answer their question with a question, or answer their statement with a question. If they say something won't work, then ask them, well, what will work? What will work? Remind the parties that their presence indicates that the situation was no longer tolerable for them. You know, ask them, why are we here? Why are we here at mediation? Well, the judge ordered us to mediation. Okay. Why did you take this case to court? Why did you file a lawsuit? Why did you file a grievance? Why did you, depending on whatever environment it is? Well, because I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand what was happening. Okay, then how would you change that? If you had the opportunity to change it, how would you change it? Do not dominate the discussion. Remember that less is more. Less is more. The less you say, the more opportunity you're going to have to get this resolved. Point out the parties' ongoing relationship. Point out their future relationship. For example, well, if you still have to live next door to someone, but, you know, they're still going to be living next door to someone. If we don't get this resolved today, what's going to happen? Okay? And they'll say, well, what do you mean? Well, am I hearing you say that you're going to move? Well, no, that house is paid for and we've been living there for 40 years. We're not going to move. Okay? And so you turn to the other, what's going to happen if we don't get this resolved today? You know, what's the likelihood that you're going to move? Well, not going to move.